This edition of Topco Business Unusual podcast. Today, I've got the famous Scott Picken, the chairman of the Global Wealth Group, all the way from Neisner at the moment. Scott?
Yeah, awesome, Ralf. Thanks for having us. I don't know so much about the famous part, but other than that, it's accurate.
I wasn't going to say infamous because then it sounds a bit dodgy, right? So we know what the investment community is like.
Exactly.
So it's really cool to have you here. I mean, one thing is I love Neisner. The other thing is that property is like a little, pet project of mine. I've got a number of properties, but I mean, and I think the third thing is you've linked that to technology, property and technology, and sort of that blockchain. It's quite innovative and kind of unreal, right? How you can tap these opportunities into fintech. So we've got Tim in the background telling me I've got to do a plug for Africa Tech Week. So, for all those guys looking to go to Africa Tech Week, this is a perfect sort of opportunity of how an entrepreneur has gone from property and sort of taken that opportunity and used technology to offer a global solution. Was that hard to think that globally? Because I know some of your background is you worked in the UK, you acquired property in South Africa from the UK. But was that often your thinking to think globally very early on?
Sure, it's an interesting question, Ralf. I think my parents or my father grew up in Zimbabwe. And so that story, and I mean, I was born in Durban, so I'm a South African, but the story of us losing the farms in Zimbabwe and not being able to kind of trust, owning assets in the in the emerging world, I think it was a story I grew up with. And so, when I studied in South Africa and then I went to London, it was two things. It was one, travel the world, and B, I wanted to be a citizen, so a global citizen. I've never earned local currency, not once. And I've always wanted to own offshore assets. So I think when you say, why did we want to be global? It's, Richard Branson always says the easiest way to build a business is to solve a problem. And in many ways, I was trying to solve my own problem. And I figured, well, if I've got a problem that I need, there must be others that are like it, And so when I thought about investing globally, it wasn't so much of like, okay, how can we help everyone anywhere invest in any good property from any amount? It was more, how could I invest in England, Australia, America, Europe, and manage it all in one place with, safely and simply without all the hassle? I mean, if anyone's ever bought a house, which you mentioned you have, you know how much hassle it is. And that's even if it's on your doorstep. When it's overseas, it's a whole different kettle of fish. So for me, the second question then came in, okay, well, it's really, really difficult to do. How can I make this easier with technology? Yeah. And that's been a 20-year journey. And I don't have all the answers yet. The world's not there yet. Technology is improving really fast, but the regulation's not there yet. And really market adoption's not there yet. You talk about blockchain, most people don't even know what blockchain is. And so the trust component's not there yet. However, it's a passion and a purpose. And I truly believe we're going to see a future where anyone will be able to invest any amount in any project anywhere in the world from, $1 swiping on their mobile phone in the foreseeable future. Whether that's 3 or 10 years, I can't tell you, but it will happen.
Yeah. And do you see, I mean, you talked about like crowdfunding and those sorts of things as part of sort of underpinning what you do. And I mean, there's a lot of talk about like Bitcoin and those sorts of technologies at the moment. And I think it's sort of misunderstood and almost not properly regulated in a lot of countries. Are you seeing a future where things like Bitcoin would come into acquiring these sort of properties? I think Tesla's like selling cars now through Bitcoin.
Yeah, so sure. I could talk for just half an hour on just this, okay? Because there's actually two components to what you just asked. So the first one is regulation in general, and let's start with crowdfunding. So different countries have adopted crowdfunding in different ways. So England has been the most proactive country in crowdfunding. To put that into perspective, they've got two platforms there, one being Seedrs, one being Crowdcube. They are currently merging and they will be bigger than AIM. So you've got the London Stock Exchange and then you've got AIM. It's like NASDAQ. It's their second, their second market. They combined will be bigger than AIM. Okay. Now that's what happens when a country is proactive about their regulation. We were talking before we came online about how to create entrepreneurship and how to help and fund entrepreneurs. Well, a simple way is to allow it to happen from a regulatory space. Now, a mutual friend of ours, Kevin Allen, and I actually 5 years ago, 6 years ago, set up the African Crowdfunding Association. It was him and I, because we wanted to bring regulation not only to South Africa, but to the continent. And I'm really grateful and chuffed to say that about 3 months ago, we got the first license in South Africa and in Africa. Okay, now why is that important? This has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. This purely has to do with regulation in the fintech space. But why this is really positive is two things. One is that the regulator is moving towards where the industry is going now, which is great because it's been very difficult when you wanting to work with the regulator, but there was no box to put yourself in. And secondly, it allows mass adoption, because the way people have been institutionalized is that if it's not regulated, I can't trust it. And it allows this trust component. Now, you bring in cryptocurrency, which is the second part of your question. And, this has been, the naysayers have been talking about this for 10 years, and it kind of just, even the CEO of JP Morgan, 3-4 years ago was like, Bitcoin's absolutely useless, and now they're buying it, as an example.
Yeah, now they're buying it.
Exactly, now they're buying it, so it's really interesting how that's changed. It's still an unregulated space. I mean, you still hear, that drugs are paid for with Bitcoin, which I find hilarious, because more drugs are paid for with US dollars around the world than anything else. But to answer your question in terms of buying Tesla, what is interesting is that we actually allowed people from 2017 to invest in property using Bitcoin through our platform. And it had such a small take up, it was not even worth it. I mean, for the amount of money and the transaction fees and the complexity and everything, it just wasn't worth it. And the problem was for us as well, is that it then relegated us to the crazy camp. Okay, so like if you want to go to a traditional bank, or, we've integrated with Lemonway, which is the biggest payment service provider out of Europe with European regulation backed by the top 5 banks. They literally said to us, if you're associated with cryptocurrency, we can't help you. So for this like 0.0001% of our customer base that wanted to use Bitcoin versus the 99.9% of the majority that wanted to use fiat, it didn't make commercial sense, if that, and that's the impasse I think we all find ourselves in, is that we want to kind of go towards where the future is, but there's some very big players, mainly the banks and the regulations, that are not allowing it, and you can't play on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, I think that's I see it, right? It's one of those big challenges where are they forcing you out because it competes with them? And the thing about JP Morgan and those guys, they probably got they're probably buying Bitcoin, but got some insurance derivative that they're backing, that if it does, go down or crash, that they're fine, right? They've got good insurance mechanisms. So, I mean, are you seeing a big adoption for South African properties more from the international sphere? Are you seeing more from South Africans buying property internationally? I mean, there was this thought that why are so many South Africans sending their wealth overseas? But in fact, one of the things I heard, and I don't know if it was Clem that said this, but one of the economists, David Root maybe, and he said that actually as a proportion of our wealth, our own private wealth, that South Africans have the most of their personal wealth in South Africa. Actually, there's not enough diversification in terms of wealth to other areas. So it seems that there's a lot of money leaving the country, but in comparison to other countries, it's quite small.
Yeah, it's a very good way of putting it. There was another event that I was at with a family office that I highly recommend. And he said, if you take the world's global GDP, South Africa constitutes about 1% of the world's global GDP. And therefore, if you're doing a simple diversification strategy, you should have 1% of your net asset value in South Africa and the rest proportionally around the world. I don't believe that's a South African thing. If you had all your money tied up in America, in American residential real estate in 2008, 2009, and in some cities it crashed as much as 40 to 70%. Now, to put that in perspective, if you own a house for R1 million, it dropped to 300,000 Rand, to put in perspective. And if you had your money all tied up in that, you equally would have got a problem. If you were all in the UK when they had Brexit or whatever. So where I think it's so important, the guy I would recommend most for people to follow in terms of financial information is a guy called Ray Dalio. His book Principles is absolutely amazing.
Great book.
And you can sum it up in literally one sentence. And he says, in these current times, what you have to do is diversify across countries, across currencies, across assets, and even across partners. The challenge most of us have is that, Ralf, if you and I want to go out and we want to buy a house in England, a house in South Africa, invest in the stock market in America, buy some I don't know, something else in Australia. Now we've got to go and we've got to like have 4 different holding structures. We've got 4 different tax regimes. We've got to have 4 different bank accounts. We're going to have a hell of a lot of cash to do it to start off with, et cetera. It's just been, we could understand the theory, but it was impossible.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's not. Nowadays with technology, no one has an excuse. You can go on easy equities and you can trade not only the local stock market in South Africa, but you can invest offshore. And literally, I think their minimum investment's like R1. You can go on our platform now and you can start from $100, and invest. And you don't have to worry about the tax, the banking, the structures, and whatever. My point being is that you asked the question, are we seeing capital inflows coming into South Africa? And the answer is no. And I moved to London in 1999. I started a company in 2004 called RPS, International Property Solutions. We helped about 2,500 investors invest into South Africa, England, Australia, and America. I could count the number of foreigners on one hand that invested in South Africa in those years. Because when you're overseas, all you hear is all the political challenges and they, often in those days, they couldn't even tell the difference between us and Zimbabwe and the land grabs and everything in between. So unfortunately, we keep shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of our overseas sentiment. So the only people who were investing back in South Africa were expats because they could get a better deal in South Africa than they could in London at the time. Or more importantly, they could afford a deal in South Africa at the time. They couldn't afford a deal in London at the time. The capital flows the other way, for me, is common sense. Whether you live in South Africa or China or India or Brazil or anywhere else in the emerging world, I think this is the best place to live in the world. Personally, I live here by choice. I don't have to live here. I have an offshore passport. I could move to Europe tomorrow morning if I wanted to. I don't. I choose to live here. However, I really think it's important to be a global citizen. And what I mean by that is to own first world assets with a first world income, because that gives you the freedom to make the choices you want in your life. Now, again, you can sit, and South Africans tend to be very negative and say, oh, people are taking their money out and whatever. No, not at all. If you're growing your wealth overseas and you're contributing back in society and you're a functioning member of society, you're adding to the value of that country. Now, let me give you an example. In England in the 1800s, England went out and conquered the world. It became the Great British Empire, not because they went inward, because they went outward. Interesting concept.
For sure. It's diversifying outward, opening up the borders. But I mean, as an organization, you guys aren't just in those areas. You've actually grown outwards to China. And I said to you earlier, it was interesting to see your LinkedIn page. And it's actually had, some Mandarin there. So obviously that's one of the tricks for the trade if you're going to go to do work in China. But I mean, are there lessons that you've learned? Are there challenges that you had to overcome in growing the business and taking it to different locations? Are there practical things that if you had to do it again, that you would make sure those boxes that you ticked?
Sure, Ralf. I could be here for the next 3 days in lessons. I won't necessarily give you solutions, but I can definitely tell you mistakes. The biggest one that I've learned recently in another great book is a book called No Rules Rules. And it's the story of Netflix. And what I'm learning over and over and over again is that great companies are built by great cultures. And what I've allowed is components that have not sufficed to being a great culture. So that's really important. And you could be anywhere in the world. Netflix is expanded all over the world now, but they've stuck to their principle of culture and values and everything else. So that for me, is a great video by Adriana Huffington on how she started Thrive. And again, there's lots of resources, but go and check out those two to start off with. The second one is alignment, being very clear on what the goal is and where you're getting to. There's a big difference between creating a marketplace and empowering people from all over the world to invest and just trying to go after wealthy people and make short-term cash. And it's, that's very important from an alignment perspective. So when you get those two things right and you add to that your purpose, which is, what is the big picture? Why are we here? What drives us each and every day? So our purpose is that we help solve the wealth gap. Everything that we do must be a step forward in direction to that purpose. Is that if you get those three things aligned, then when you go find partners, they have to align with those first before you worry about the rest. Okay, so to come back to your question, we learned that seriously the hard way in China. Okay, so we went to China in 2015. My first trip to China was in 2003. But for business, I was invited to the very first crowdfunding event in China in 2015. I presented there, and I was just blown away by the scale and size of China. It just was incredible. So I found a partner on the ground, flew them out to South Africa. We did a bunch of negotiations. We agreed to put $1 million in to start our Chinese office. And what they promised us was phenomenal. We were going to have 500,000 members within a year. We were going to raise $60 million. It was like, woohoo! It was like Christmas time. And about a year later, we had deployed our $1 million, and we had about 23 members. That's not an investor. That's just 23 people on WeChat. And I think we had raised like $20,000. I mean, it was like an absolute and utter joke. And the big lesson we learned was we did what every other Western company did, which was we went into China and told them how to do it in China. And what we realized, and again, one of the biggest lessons I ever learned.
It wasn't the investor.
Pardon?
So it wasn't necessarily the investor. You'd done your due diligence. It was more around not being responsive to the environment.
Well, it's that and what I'm about to mention. While you're paying for someone's salary in a foreign country, you're trying to manage them long distance. It's like impossible. Okay. So in 2017, we changed that round and we said, look, we're going to do our next funding round, but this is going to be different. I'm going to support you to raise capital from your friends and family and, you know, the people you know. And you're going to, because they already had ownership in the business, but now the capital is going to come from within, not from overseas. And I tell you, it was such a stark difference. You know, for the first year, every time we'd fly, they would be taken to fancy restaurants and whatever with our money. And when we came back, they would take us to like the equivalent of McDonald's. I was like, great, that's where we should have been from the beginning. And from there, we just grew, you know, that country's just grown from strength to strength. So not only enabling them to be empowered themselves, but raising local capital so that they had complete local buy-in to, you know, it was their friends that they were spending the capital on now, not some idiot overseas. When we got that model right, we then, and again, our mutual friend, Kevin, we then rolled that out across multiple countries. We then did roadshows around the world, and we said, listen, we don't want to go to Australia or America or England or Dubai and go and actually set up a company and employ employees and have to micromanage them long distance and whatever. We want to go and enable co-ownership. So I tend to like to say it's like business within a box. It's not a franchise, because franchise is top-down control. You know, if you own a KFC or McDonald's, they tell you everything literally down to where you buy your chicken. It's not that. It's a strategic partnership. This is how we do it in this market. It will be different in your market, but if we collaborate in a global ecosystem, we both win.
So, I mean, that business model is quite unique, and it's because it's not a franchise, and it's not like, it's almost like a partnership in a way, right? And you call it strategic partnership.
Yeah, we call it strategic partnership, exactly.
So, I mean, Kevin told me some of the stories about, I think you went and got about $7 million over a year's worth of, you know, trying to get these investments. And I mean, how hard was that to even get that sort of amount of money internationally? What were the sort of challenges that did you have to overcome in that scenario, going to the States, going to Australia? They must have been very skeptical.
They are skeptical if you turn up not knowing anyone on the ground, but it's all about partnership. So our entire business has been built on partnership. And so when you've got local partners with local connections, then they are the ones that, you know, you're not putting an ad on Facebook and people are just turning up to a hotel. They're being invited by a local partner they already trust. What they like about it is that the local partner on their own is a brand new startup, fairly insignificant with no scale. But by partnering with a global ecosystem, it's a piece of a bigger pie. And so there's a win-win situation. And so it worked quite effectively in America, in England, in Dubai. Funny enough, it didn't work at all in Australia. And we can debate that for as long as you want. The Australians seem to be very conservative. But my point being is that it was a model that worked and we just kept recreating it. But it was all based on partnership, and it was all about local partners. So again, I want to go into India. India is the next frontier. We want to be in India. We've already tried. We did our first event in India in 2019. And COVID kind of messed everything up for us a little bit. I'm really excited about India. I think there's huge opportunity there. we've got one partner on the ground, and again, it's someone who's a global shareholder. So he's got he's invested $250,000. So he's got a significant need to help us succeed. But with him on the ground, we then get access to all the right networks, etc. But we haven't figured it out yet. Some countries are more complex than others. India being one of them.
I mean, I saw in your one video, it's like property investor, author, all these things, and then it said networker. And I think at network it had like Richard Branson there with you, and like Zuckerberg, and I think that one of the things that's really become clear for me is that you've almost built this reputation of getting very strong and highly sought after partners who have got credibility on their own, and you've been able to sort of partner up with these guys. What would you say is is there a secret to that? Is there a pattern of things that you do to identify these people? What would you put that down to?
Sure, good question. I think the simple answer, I mean, I hate the word networking, but the simple answer to it is adding value to people. Okay, so people tend to phone you up, Ralf, and they, hey Ralf, can you do a podcast for me? And it's like, well, why would I want to do that? and the logic is, it's like, no, it's Ralf, how can I add value to you? It's a completely different mindset from what I can get to what I can give. So I'll give you an example of that. When I was trying to build relationships, I don't even know how long ago this was, 15 or odd years ago in South Africa, there were the top 12 property people in the country. I mean, you know who they are: Samuel Seif, Bill Rawson, Andrew Golding, all of them. And I found one of the best books that I found in America, and I bought 12 copies of it, and I posted 12 copies to each one of them personally. And 11 of them didn't get back to me, but Bill Rawson did. And Bill, to this day, I would consider a good friend and a mentor. And, he shares books with me and I share books with him. And, we've done quite a lot of business together. So, for me, it's not what you can get, it's what you can give. And over time, if you can give more than you get, then the relationships kind of build upon each other.
I mean, these are strong principles, right? I mean, I think it's one of those things that sometimes the simple things are the things that it's so endearing. It's like that book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's a similar sort of thing. Think about how you can help someone add value to their life, and inevitably you'll get value into your life. You've got that quote on your LinkedIn profile from Zig Ziglar that says almost something identical. So it's like you're living those values.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we've built the entire business on those values, which are, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. And, there's another part to that, which I think is equally as important. And that's about kind of having, you can call it whatever you like, a moonshot, a goal, whatever. So my goal, I mean, I love Richard Branson. I literally idolize him. Okay. And
so I'm going to send you his book, Scott.
Well, that's the point. I read all the books and whatever, and, and then I was like, right, I want to meet him. Okay. And I think it was like 2011 or something. And I met him. But let's be frank, I met him at an event with 2,000 other people. And, I might have shook his hand for like a millisecond. He definitely didn't know who I was. Yeah. And then it was about 2014, and I saw this video from another guy I follow and respect called Roger Hamilton, and he was on Necker Island. I was like, what? You can actually go to Necker Island? And so anyway, I reversed engineered it. I was like, well, how'd you do that? And he says, no, well, there's this group of entrepreneurs in America, and it's a bit like a golf club, and you've got to be invited to be part of it, and you've got to be purposeful and whatever. And then once you get invited to that, 25 of them go once a year to Necker Island to spend a week with Rich Branson. I was like, right, I'm making that happen. And it was one of the most incredible experiences I ever had. And I did it again in 2016. And the people I met were just phenomenal. I mean, I fundamentally believe you should always put yourself in the room where you're the dumbest, poorest person in the room. And I mean, I was the dumbest, poorest person by a long way, in terms of that. But just spending a week with Rich Branson, I mean, literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like asking him everything you want to know, including the naughty stuff. Like, I don't know if you've seen the picture with the naked girl on his back, who happens to be a South African, by the way. I mean, she's gorgeous. And I was like, but dude, you're married. Like, surely your wife would kill you. And I mean, just sometimes there's the fun questions you want to ask, not just how do you make $1 billion or dollars. And back to that goals thing. I really feel strongly in life, if you set an intention and you ask, you never know what might happen. Okay, so let me give you another example. I want to interview Ray Dalio. I respect him more than anyone at the moment in the financial space. In the last couple of weeks, I think I found a way So I'm basically now dealing with his assistant that runs all his calendar. Okay. And she's literally come back to me and said, give me a good reason, like give me a topic. We love your values, we love your purpose. Give me a good topic to like do a webinar. Now I want to be clear, it hasn't happened. Okay. But you can see the intentions there. And it probably might, well, it might happen next month. It might happen next year. But I guarantee you, in the next 10 years, I will meet or interview Ray Dalio. Okay, and that's why I say that with a bit of a smile on my face, because it's kind of like the Richard Branson thing. If you'd said to me 10 years before, you're going to spend a week with him on an island, I would have gone, dude, you're dreaming. But the intention was clear, and sometimes the universe kind of conspires to just help you get there.
I mean, it really goes to that principle. Why are you chasing these people, and why is that important? And is it because of that principle of the 5 people you spend the most time with? Is it about that? Is it that getting that knowledge from other people? That's why reading is so important. Do you think because you're picking up people's secrets, insights,
Tony Robbins, Tony Robbins says it best. He says the fastest way to success is to copy a successful person. The fastest way to wealth is to copy a wealthy person. So for me, it's, I've said this already, but I try to put myself in the room where I'm the dumbest, poorest person, because that can only pull you up. It's interesting, when I was talking about it on another recording this morning, but when I went to Necker Island, there was only one piece of homework you had to do. And that was that you had to bring a life hack along. So what is a life hack? It's a way that you've hacked life, that life's become easier. And you can imagine you're sitting with these 25 incredible people, and everyone got over the week to share their life hack. And so when you left, you were given like 25 ways to like extremely increase the productivity or whatever of your life from 25 highly successful people. It was like invaluable. I mean, you can't pay enough money for that type of stuff. So, I think
Can you share one?
Huh?
Can you share one?
Yeah, everything from the most crazy guy, like went on and on and on about meditation. And, for me, meditation, and we've all heard this, but meditation for me was like, whatever, the arty-farty guys like do that, And yet what I've noticed, I mean, even Ray Dalio does meditation and has done since 1980. I started like after that going, hang on, I need to get into meditation. I'll just give you an example. Another guy did a life book where like he had his whole life planned out, and he literally like, you could see how it all worked, and he shared it with his team. And another guy.
What's the life book? What was the life book?
It's like your life. It's like, what do you want in your relationship?
Okay, so you shared your goals, your aspirations, everything.
Exactly. Another guy did a future vision, which is where you put yourself in a year ahead and you look backwards as to everything that you've achieved and you're grateful for, even though it's a year ahead. Then he shares it with his team. So he's like, right, team, this is the year we're about to have. And then, they work together to make it a reality. Another one from a business one that I loved was the guy ran a call center. Now, just by the way, he had my attention because he sold his call center for $800 million and owned an island next to Richard Branson's island. But anyway, my point being is that he reckoned the number one thing he did to build culture was that he had this, I forget what he called it now, but anyway, every 3 months, it was a gift program, a dream. They called it dreams or something. And everyone in the company could like write in, like it could be literally, I want curtains for my house, or I want my kid to go to school or whatever. And every quarter they would vote on who should get it. And I mean, these stories were just incredible. But what did that do? I mean, call centers, it's a call center. Like, I mean, people hate their jobs in call centers generally. Okay. But they had this amazing, I'll send you the video if you're interested, Ralf. And like amazing. And this is like a little trick. And he said to me, Scott, this thing cost him, sometimes a person wanted a digital camera because they were having a wedding or something, and, it cost him sometimes a couple of $100 even. And sometimes it was a kid that's about to die and they sent him to the, NFL or something, and it cost a bit more money. But he said the value that built within his team and the culture and the community and everything else, he said it was invaluable. I got goosebumps telling you the story. So like, these are little tricks that, you're just like, wow, like that's brilliant. Like I never thought of that, and we came back, and I remember we did that in our company, and the one lady's mother, we were having load shedding at the time, and she was in an old age home and they had no power. And we bought a generator for like 5,000 Rand or something, and now they had power and they could watch TV, And I mean, just the tears and emotion from people is just phenomenal, So.
But I mean, it's not just that you've done giving back. You've done some other cool stuff. Like obviously, giving back's part of your values as well, right? And helping other people. it seems to be really close to your purpose.
Well, again, I mean, I've already mentioned this, but I fundamentally believe if you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. So what a lot of people, we challenge ourselves to empower 1 billion people. However, and when I say we, our community, but what I think people get wrong is you don't empower 1 billion people at one time. You empower one person at one time. You add value to one person, and one person adds value to 2 people, and 2 become 4, and 4 become 8. So, for me, I think a passion we both share together is entrepreneurship for children. I fundamentally believe in Africa. We can't solve Africa ever unless we solve children being able to become entrepreneurs. And so I got the rights to bring in Lemonade Day from America, and I can't remember what year it was now, 2014 or something. Now, to put in perspective, they're backed by Google for Entrepreneurs. About 300,000 children a year get trained on how to be entrepreneurs. And I was like, well, why can't we do it in Africa? And they were like, you can't. And as you might have realized, I'm not very good with the word can't. So, and we finally got it, and we did a pilot study here at the Oyster Festival in Knysna. And I suppose my shame is that we got it. We did it 2 years in a row. We did a pilot study. I mean, the one young man that did it when he was like 14, he won the competition. He flew to Joburg. He won the competition again there. We ended up putting him through crowdfunding through a private school, one of the better schools in the country. He's currently at university. And I tend to joke he could be the next Elon Musk. What scares me and why I say it's a real shame is I then went to the corporates and I said, to roll this out, I need your support. I need to go to like ShopRite Checkers, who's got distribution. I don't want to be, running this all over the country. That's not my thing. I want to, and it had to be someone like, we went to F&B, we went to ShopRite Checkers. I'm trying to think who else. But anyway, those type of companies that have big distribution and geographical distribution, we just couldn't get their attention. And so it kind of petered out. I mean, it was still very small, but it's only like in one town. And if we're going to change a country, you can't change it one town at a time. You have to do it properly, So these are the things I struggle with, Ralf, as I'm sure we all do, is that you want to do more. But, there's a good principle for everyone who's listening to this. You have to make enough money to be able to have a decent impact. You can be poor, and anyone that says, you don't like money and whatever, but if you've got no money, you can't have any impact, So you've got to balance together the commercial component and the purposeful component together. And I think that's something I've struggled with, because I would love to just go out and help the world, but you have to bring the profitable part to it. Otherwise it's not sustainable.
I think Warren Buffett said the same thing. Like, he had to make his money before he starts giving it away. And he's linked up with Bill Gates, Melinda, but he realized he had to make that money first before he could share it with the world. But I mean, like entrepreneurship, when we spoke about this briefly, but the government seems to be fixated on creating jobs, which is, I think, a secondary outcome of creating entrepreneurs. And so like you, I travel and I see certain cultures, and we talk about cultures in companies, but there's also cultures in countries as well. And how do we drive that culture of entrepreneurship? I think one of the things that intrigued me with you is that you obviously studied at UCT and studied further in the UK. And so, I was wondering, where did this entrepreneurial bug sort of come from with you? How did it fall in your world? Was it from your father?
Yeah, look, there's while you were talking there's 3 things I want to mention. So the first one, let's answer that question first. My dad did what everyone was told to do. He went to school, went to university, got a degree, wanted to be a farmer in Zim, but got kicked off the farms, came to South Africa, became a chartered accountant, ended up becoming a financial director of Rainbow Chickens, but yet trusted the financial industry. And at the age of 59, actually died broke. And unfortunately for me, statistically, 94% of the people watching this recording will follow my father. Statistically, 5% will be financially independent, which is what the industry calls it, but you're actually financially trapped, and only 1% will be wealthy. And so at a very young age, I went, well, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not following that formula. It doesn't work. I've seen it happen to my own family. And I tend to say, I saw money destroy my own family. And so I went, no, that it has to be a better way. And so I loved property from a very young age. I played Monopoly since as young as I could. And I started computer programming with a Commodore 64 and Logo back when I was like 6. So I've tried to marry the two together. And I think the entrepreneurial bug just came, I did when I went to London and I did a master's full-time on top of a full-time job. But by the age of 25, I realized I'd be the world's worst employee. I hated being told what to do. And I hated doing kind of this, what I'm going to call old school way of doing stuff, including being micromanaged and having to work between 8 and 6. It was just ridiculous. So that's when I went on my own. And my logic was, if I'm 25, like I thought about doing an MBA and it was going to cost me about $200,000 in America to do it. I thought, well, I can go on my own. And if I fail, like I don't have any kids, I don't have a wife, I don't, like I can go sleep on my mate's couch. Like there's no risk, and whereas once you get into your 30s and 40s and you've got the private schools and the house and the mortgage, like it's much more difficult. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is back to your culture of entrepreneurship is that it's interesting because we pop ourselves in South Africa for having a culture of entrepreneurship, but I actually think we've got a much bigger culture of entrepreneurship than a country like England does or Australia does. And the reason being is that there's so many handouts and grants in those countries that if I take my top 20 mates, at least half of us are entrepreneurs, literally half. Okay, because there's no backup system. you have to go and create something. Whereas in England, it's like, I go to university, I get a job. Like, why would I take all that risk? It doesn't make any sense, And equally, there's many sectors of the South African economy where there isn't a job. They can't get a job, so they start a spaza or they clean a car or whatever. So I think we sometimes downplay the culture of entrepreneurship. We're very good at succeeding through adversity and not taking no for an answer, which I think we've all got used to thriving in chaos, which is what an entrepreneur is all about. I think the challenge we've got in South Africa, and Clem Santa says it best. In America, if you're an entrepreneur, they roll out the red carpet. And in South Africa, if you're an entrepreneur, they roll out the red tape.
He did say that, you're right. And it's crazy, right? Because entrepreneurs are the opposite. Like you give them red tape, but they do find solutions around it. I think that's pretty clear. Well, I think one of the things so I agree with you, like wealth creation, I saw that. And I read it probably in that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I remember reading it before I had my first son. And I thought to myself, why isn't this sort of knowledge shared more readily with people? I think that was that big wake up call. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Like actually you must work and create wealth, not just spend your money and buying stuff. Like just buy this new car or whatever. Like how there's a bit of a formula for buying assets that's going to have annuity, that's going to create wealth for you. So I think equally now in my life, I see a lot of business people or entrepreneurs. And I think the thinking is that, not many of those businesses are actually ever sold. So about 90% of them either close down in some capacity because the entrepreneur themselves has fallen apart. And what I see a big opportunity in South Africa is how do you get financing and how do you get investors internationally to grow that business? And that's why I think I was so excited to speak to you, is that journey of getting outside, taking the Band-Aid off. You've done it in South Africa. There's not too many that I think you're right. We've got some great entrepreneurs, some great business people, and they do really well internationally. And so why aren't more of us taking off that Band-Aid and getting out there and getting that funding?
So look, the challenge with the funding is that, the question you're asking is multifaceted, because the challenge with the funding is that in America, and put it in perspective, we've raised now somewhere between 18 and 19 million dollars. I don't know exactly what the number is. Okay. So it's a decent amount of capital. In America, they won't talk to you unless you need $10 million. Okay. And most South Africans don't need $10 million. In South Africa, the venture capital market here is very small, and they think that 5 million rand is a lot of money. Okay. Now that's like $350,000. I mean, that's nothing. Okay. And then there's kind of there is the ecosystem of like the RMIs, and there's a few of them, but they tend to value companies on EBITDA. So kind of the fintechs are out the water as well. And so you've got this massive gap between, okay, it's okay to be like this tiny little startup with you and your mate in a garage, and now you want to go global and you need like overseas funding. And that's the impasse. That's why they struggle so much in terms of the process. So we just decided to do it completely differently. And we've done a combination of crowdfunding through Seeders, which is the top platform in England, as well as angels from around the world. But really the book I would recommend people to read is called Behind the Cloud. It's what gave me the idea. And it's how Mark Benioff started Salesforce in 99. Because in 99, everyone said, CRM's customer relationship management is never going to go in the cloud. And he was like, well, I've got customers that are doing it. So then he went to his customers and said, well, you believe in it, you're using it, why don't you become shareholders? And the rest is history. It's the 10th biggest tech company in the world now. So I think Ralf, the answer is about creativity, and again about adding value, and not just kind of sticking to the norm. And if you go to a couple of VCs and they say no, and you're like, okay, well, this is not going to work. Like, I don't agree with that. It's find a different way of doing it. Find a different way to add value. And I'd love to on a second point, I'd love to just share something with you if you don't mind, which I just find uncanny. I find how the universe talks to us sometimes is absolutely just utterly bizarre. But I'm doing so again, we talk a lot today. We've spoken a lot about, how do you get successful? You copy successful people. And I literally have been doing a course for the last 2 days with one of my can I just share my screen quickly? I just want to show you something very quickly.
Sure.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So there's a guy called Steve Larsen and Russell Brunson. So Russell Brunson's like one of the biggest internet marketers in the world. He makes $50 million a month, just to put in perspective.
So say that again, because that didn't come through quickly.
So there's two guys, one called Steve Larsen and one called Russell Brunson. Now Russell Brunson, to put in perspective, makes $50 million a month, okay, through doing internet launches. So I've been doing this course and doing this mastermind. And it's so interesting you just mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because one of the questions we got asked was, what is the one thing that all of your proper customers, your best customers, what have they all read? What do they all understand? And it's like, without fail, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's so interesting because you just mentioned it. So I literally went just yesterday. I know this is a terrible picture and it's not supposed to be a design.
That's good. The investor. Yeah. Fine.
I literally went like, you got the E's and you got the S's. And what do people want to know? They want to know how to get from E to S to I. And so literally we're gonna create a product on the 4-step wealth formula and how you can do it in 60 minutes. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying you're going to get wealthy in 60 minutes. All I'm saying is you're going to get a plan. And what I realized, if I look at Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is that I read the book as well 20 years ago. And the overall takeaway was, run out there in the street and go buy a house, which is probably why you and I bought a bunch of houses. But they're bloody hard to manage. And honestly, they don't actually provide you with a very good return. Houses are middle class investments. I'm sorry to be crude, but they are.
Yeah.
You can get far better returns from investing in what the top 1% invest in. And what's interesting using technology is that you don't need $10 million anymore to do it. You can do it with $100 or $1,000 or whatever. So I tell you why I'm just excited by this is because you talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I think he's changed the world in terms of people's understanding. I'm frustrated that my son, who's 9, is not learning that at school. I mean, that would be far more valuable than a language or some rubbish that he doesn't need.
Sure.
But what's key, though, is education's one thing, and people have plenty of knowledge, but they need direction. And what I mean by that is the technology's changed now where it can help you. Like, you don't need 50 steps, and it doesn't take you 10 years. Like, there's literally 4 things you need to do. And you can map it out and you can use technology. And what excites me is that 20 years on, I think he wrote that book, I've got no idea, in 1995 maybe. So 25 years on, I just believe that his philosophy is 100% correct. But now with technology, everybody has access to it, not just the few that could go out and buy a house.
Yeah, for sure. I've given that book to each of my kids as well. And I made them read it. And there was a junior one before that when they were really young that had better pictures and stuff. But it's almost, and I agree with you. It's like, I don't know if it's disappointing or, why aren't we sharing those sorts of books with the youth? Because they're the things that will give them that freedom and the opportunities to change the way they think. I suppose it's more about the way they think and not being driven into us.
I don't know how much conspiracy theory you want me to go into, but one of his other books, and I forget what it was called now, but it was one of Robert Kiyosaki's other books, was talking about the whole education system and how it was effectively developed during the industrial age. And actually, if you teach people about money and investing, then they won't want to be employees and they won't want to pay their taxes, so they won't be good little corporate citizens. And I think it's just really interesting when if you want to be conspiracy theory, if you look at the education system, both at school and at university, why did we not get taught this stuff? I'll give you a good story, a completely different story. It's 2009. I'm in Bondi Beach, Australia, so Sydney, Australia, and I meet two very wealthy gentlemen. One was a US dollar millionaire, the other one was a US dollar billionaire. And we're right in the heart of the crash. And I said to them, "What are you investing in?" And they said, "Medical buildings." I said, "That's interesting. Why medical buildings?" And just before I tell you why medical buildings, and I don't tell you this to boast, but I have a honors degree cum laude in property. I have a master's degree cum laude in property and technology. Like, you would think that with those degrees, you should learn some important stuff about actually investing. Well, they literally said to me, "Think about it, Scott, no matter what happens in the global economy, people need doctors." I was like, "Well, that makes sense." Secondly, doctors never leave their premises. Like, think back to when you were a child, like your medical premises, I bet you they're still medical premises. And thirdly, doctors are hell of a good at being doctors, but they're not accountants, so they sign good long-term favorable leases. Now you go back to like property 101, okay? You got a tenant that's economically resilient, that never leaves and pays a good rent. And I was like, why didn't anyone ever teach me that? It's like so simple. Like why didn't I learn that at school? And then I was like, okay, cool. Well, how do I participate? And they said, "No, it's easy. It costs 5 million Australian dollars." And I was like, there's the catch. And really that's been the passion that's driven us building Wealth Migrate, because my philosophy is that whether you got $5 million or $1,000 or even $100, we can bring you together and we can participate in those same deals. And there's two parts to it which are really important, because access is only one part of it. You've got to get knowledge and self-belief that it's even possible. I tend to say there's actually 6 steps. But Ralf, we're not taught this. We're taught at school not to trust ourselves when it comes to money, to trust financial planners, to trust the banks. And I, unfortunately, conspiracy theory, think that it's done for a reason. And on top of that, I've already given you the stats. Statistically, 99% of us are going to fail for the very thing we're all trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It has to change, dude. It has to change.
Yeah, it's so weird. And I think it starts with educating yourself, right, and reading those sorts of books like you did. I think I read all of Robert's books. In fact, I must have read them several times. Cash Flow Quadrant, you name it. So it's about that. It's really, I mean, there's these opportunities throughout the rest of the world with property. What are you seeing in the rest of Africa? Are you seeing any appetite for opportunities in technology, fintech in Africa? Are you seeing that as a blue horizon, or are you seeing it as maybe too risk?
So just a quick one on the books. I'll give you a link, and if you want to share it below, it's what we call an e-wealth pack. And I've actually put all the books down by business, investing, leadership. They're not all the best books. They're just my opinion of the best books, but it just makes it easy for someone if they want to go and check it out. And I'm happy to give that to you and your listeners as a gift.
Thank you.
In terms of Africa, I think there's 2 parts to that. One is I'm having a very interesting conversation at the moment with one of the big funds. So they are listed out of London and out of Mauritius and on the JSE, so all 3 places. And they invest in commercial assets outside of South Africa, but in Africa. And I'm actually really interested to get involved in it, because you got like the American embassy as your tenant, and they're there for like 20 years, and you're being paid in US dollars. Like, it's a very good investment. Okay. There's another opportunity where this company is looking to put solar across all their different platforms. They own the buildings, they just want to put them on the roofs. And again, it's very good returns. So it's interesting, because I actually see inward investment coming into that. Obviously, it's quite risky. You've got to be very careful who the partners are and what their track record is, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the one component, which I'm going to call alternative investing into Africa. The other component, which you asked, is fintech in Africa. And I think that's actually exploding. There's a lot of talk that like Lagos in Nigeria is bigger than Cape Town and got more entrepreneurship. And I was on a webinar with Roger Hamilton on Tuesday this week. And, he's got about 3 million entrepreneurs around the world, and they're currently listing in New York for about $500 million. So I tend to take his opinion quite seriously. And we were talking about Africa, and he was saying like India is literally exploding at the moment. Like literally all the e-commerce, edtech, fintech unicorns are coming out of India. And for me, it's just common sense. And he was like, after that, it's Africa. And the reason being is that people's necessities here are so much more. Like, so as an example, in America, I could go to university, or I could kind of go online and learn a course, but it's a choice between the two.
Mm.
In Africa, I go online and learn, or I don't go to school. It's like that simple, so necessity creates it. And what happens is you jump through technology hoops. We don't even have telephone lines, so we don't have to worry about dial-up, etc. And that's why like M-Peso and those things are like groundbreaking worldwide, the Bitcoin of Africa, if you want to call it that. And so I think two things happen in Africa and in India, but it's happening more in Africa going forward, is that necessity is driving it.
Yeah.
And the second thing, which is the most exciting thing for me, is that there's 3.5 billion people that are going to be joining the global economy in the next, who knows, once the satellites come out, but the next couple of years, definitely. And those people, a huge majority of them are coming from Africa, like something like 800 or 900 million of them. Okay. And what do they want? They want access to education. They want access to wealth. They want access to health. They want access to energy, like green tech, and so in my opinion, there's tremendous opportunity in Africa, but it's for the it's for the mentally rugged, and that's China's no different, and neither is India. I heard a beautiful thing, and if you ever consider yourself to be grateful for growing up in South Africa, I believe that we learned how to live with chaos management, and if you can live with chaos management, you can thrive in the emerging world. If you grew up in Australia and everything just happens in sequence, you can't succeed in Africa or India or China, because nothing happens in sequence. you got to figure it out, because basically stuff goes wrong all the time.
Our bad parts are our advantages. And I mean, just lastly, I'm envious of you in Knysna. I live in Kommetjie, but I bought a whole lot of flats and property in Cape Town. And with COVID, things sort of went down and sort of coming up. Are you seeing this sort of buying flats, investing in those sorts of things? Are you seeing that sort of part of the property portfolio decreasing? Or do you see when things come back from vaccines that's going to be an opportunity again?
Ralf, do you want me to tell you the answer you want to hear, or do you want me to tell you what I think? So I was on a call with John Rabi just yesterday. So Rabi is Century City and the whole bank shoot.
I bought into that.
Okay, and he's probably the most successful, or one of the most successful developers in Cape Town. I think the world's changing dramatically, and what I mean by that is I own 16 properties in South Africa, like you, houses and apartments. And when I looked at my returns on the platform that I was getting, both locally and internationally, where I'd gone up the value chain, I wasn't buying retail, I was buying institutional level returns. I was getting higher level returns with less hassle. And then I had my South African properties, the bloody tenant didn't play, and then the management agent would break the property, and there was invariably a 1 month vacancy, and then I had to fix the carpets, every bloody year, and the geyser burst and whatever. It's just hassle, basically. And I looked at it and I went, this is ridiculous. I'm making more return with less hassle here versus these. And so I sold all of these off. I've sold every single one off, except for the house I live in Knysna. Mm-hmm. And to answer your question, I do believe that residential is going to be one of the future segments. Medical, logistics, and anything that's future-proofed will property will still have a very strong part of your investment portfolio. But where I think it'll be different is I don't think it'll be Ralf out there owning, I'm making it up, 5 houses or apartments and trying to put a tenant in and managing it. I think it'll be partnering with John Rabi. Signature does their next development at Wex, and rather than selling off 100 or 150 units separately, the whole building is owned by thousands of investors, from anywhere. It creates far better economies of scale. You don't have 100 different management agents managing 100 different units. You have one management agent managing the entire building. And because of those economies of scale, you get far better returns, you negotiate better cost with the bank, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly your menial return actually turns into quite an attractive return, which is why in America, residential is institutional and what they call commercial investment. It's called multifamily. You don't buy a single unit in America. You buy the whole building of 350 units. I see that coming to South Africa, and I see technology enabling that. And by the way, I see that being a massive value add for you, and I see it being a massive value add for John Rabi, because he doesn't have to worry about whether he might or might not sell his units over the years.
Yeah, there's that investment in Cape Town that we bought into, but there's a clump of us, which is unusual, that bought like 5 apartments. So it's already starting. And I think the other thing is that Airbnb sort of penalizes you when there's lots of competition. So they sort of encourage the lowest price. So what they're doing is they're driving your profits down indirectly. It's good for maybe the tourist. And so if one person's controlling it, then at least you know that no one's getting cheated. Everybody's sort of winning. It's not because someone's poor that day and they have to drive their price down.
Look, at the end of the day, if you look at technology in any industry, I don't care if it's the taxi industry, the music industry, you take the industry, there's three things that technology's done. It's cut out the middleman, it's cut the costs, and it's dramatically increased the trust, the transparency, and the accessibility. So if we take your example, it's going to cut out all the middlemen, because there's no need for all the agents and all the different people. There's 16 different middlemen. They can all go. Okay, it's just the investor and the developer, and boom. Secondly, that cuts out all the costs. Okay, dramatically cuts out the costs, even just the cost of financing. If you go to Investec and you fund a building that's worth 100 million rand, you're going to get far better, returns or cost of capital than you are if you go and buy one house.
Yeah.
And thirdly, it's going to dramatically increase that trust and transparency, because you know what you're getting. You've got the social proofing and the accessibility, because now, Ralf, you can maybe go get a mortgage because the bank likes you and you can show an income and whatever, and you've got to put down a 10% deposit and. But what about the student with 1,000 rand?
Yeah.
Or 100 rand? Why can't they participate? Why can't anyone with a smartphone be able to participate? And I think when we do that, we will fundamentally shift the perception of wealth, how to create wealth. And if we do that, we'll change the world. Because what I mean by that is that people won't be relying on other people. They'll realize they can take control for themselves.
And also it stops that whole thing of like, I've got to save so much or this big amount. It could be a habit, like part of my salary or this amount goes to that asset class that it's going to give you the best return. It's not some other asset manager managing it for you either.
The beauty, our platform's just an example, but you can go to our platform, you fund your wallet. It's your wallet. You're not giving me your money, you're putting it in your wallet, but it's a digital wallet. You're in complete control of it. Then you can fund different investments in South Africa, in America, in England, Australia, in Europe, and you choose, okay? But all your returns come back into your wallet. So it's it doesn't at the moment end up on your credit card. So you don't go and spend it your next a night out with your mates. So the idea is that you are compounding and reinvesting all those returns. And even though there could be micro returns, there might be $100 dividend you're getting paid, but you invest that $100 again, that's how you start to compound growth. And that becomes significant. Whereas what most people don't do, for the very reason you mentioned, is you need 100,000 rand deposit. So you save for your 100,000 rand, and then you buy a house. And then you bloody hurt for a good couple of years because you generally can't afford the house you're trying to pay for or whatever. And then as we all know,
fees.
Yeah, exactly. And our wealth kind of standard goes up and we spend more and more money, and that's the end of our investment journey. Whereas if we, just committed to paying 1,000 rand a month or something, we would be investing forever. And that would be a fundamental difference to the individual. Wow.
It was super awesome speaking to you, Scott. When I come to Knysna, I'm going to be knocking on your door, eh? So I think I'm inspired as well. I remember Kevin telling me that story about Richard Branson. So I'm definitely going to rip into that next time we chat as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, Ralf, it's an honor and a privilege to share. I think one of my mission statements is to inspire people to achieve the impossible. And hopefully, today, if nothing else, we've planted a few seeds of what people can do. My overarching thing that I would say to any individual, especially the entrepreneurs, because you said it's, business unusual, is get clear on your purpose and everything else will take care of itself.
For sure. And I was meant to invest in your Wealth Migrate after Kevin told me about it. I'm definitely going to be knocking on that door as well. So
I look forward to the feedback, and I'll send you that what we call the e-wealth pack, so that if people are interested, you can share it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott.
Keep well, everyone. Cheers. Bye then.
Lovely.